In 1924, the heads of General Motors, Chrysler, and several other major car manufacturers sat down together with one very specific goal: not to build better cars. The cars they were already making worked perfectly fine. The goal was to make you feel like your current car was no longer good enough, even when nothing about it had actually changed. They called it dynamic obsolescence. The idea was simple and deliberately ruthless. Engineer the desire to upgrade, not by improving the product, but by shifting what counts as normal, by making keeping up feel like basic, reasonable adult behavior. That meeting happened over 100 years ago. And that same logic now runs through nearly every spending category in your daily life. My name is Mila, and I'm obsessed with the small moves and hidden nuances that build real wealth. Today, we are going through 7 spending categories that quietly drain more money than most people realize. Not because of one big reckless decision, but because the culture has spent a very long time making those categories feel like just what normal people do. The question driving so much of what the average American spends is no longer, do I need this? Or even, do I genuinely want this? The question the system has quietly trained us to ask is what I have still normal enough? And that is a much more expensive question to live by. Research consistently finds that people underestimate their discretionary spending by 20 to 40%. Not because they are being dishonest with themselves, but because so much of it does not feel like spending. It feels like catching up, like what everyone around you is doing. That gap is not a personal failure. It is what happens when a system spends decades making low-value consumption feel like ordinary life. So this video is not about buying nothing. It is about finally questioning the spending you stopped questioning. 7 categories, each with its own trap, each one costing you more than you think. Not just in money, but in the peace of mind that money is supposed to eventually buy you. Category 1, upgrade spending. Go ahead and look at your phone right now. Seriously, pick it up. Now, think about the model that came out the year before yours. Can you actually name one thing yours does that the previous version could not? Not a feature from the commercial. Something you personally use every single day that would not have been possible on last year's model. For most people, that answer is silence. And that is exactly where upgrade spending lives. It is not just phones. It is the laptop that still runs fine but feels sluggish compared to what just launched. The TV that works perfectly but is not quite the size everyone seems to have now. The car that gets you everywhere you need to go but is a few model years behind. The headphones, the tablet, the kitchen appliances, an entire category of spending built almost entirely on the gap between what something does and what the newest version of it looks like. What makes this trap so effective is that the upgrade never feels like a luxury. It feels like maintenance, practical even. The marketing around every new release is specifically engineered to make what you already own feel like a quiet liability. Slightly slower, slightly smaller, slightly behind. And Apple releases a new iPhone every single year. But here's what they do not put in the commercial. Apple's own engineers have acknowledged internally that the meaningful innovation cycles, the ones where functionality actually changes in ways real people notice, run closer to 3 to 4 years. The annual release never stops anyway. Because the release is not really about the phone. It is about resetting your sense of what normal looks like. And in some cases, if you put a 2025 iPhone next to a 2021, the older one is genuinely the prettier object. There is a camera situation happening on the back of these phones that nobody asked for. Getting larger and more dramatic every single year until your phone can no longer lay flat on a table. You paid more. It does marginally more. It just also now looks like it lost a fight with a telescope. But back to the money. Because Americans are responding to that annual reset to the tune of roughly $80 billion a year on smartphones alone. Here is what that looks like in your actual life. The average iPhone sits around $1,000. Most people upgrade every 1 to 2 years, even though the average smartphone functions perfectly well for 4 to 5 years. If you upgrade every year at $1,000, over 10 years, you have spent $10,000 on phones alone. Upgrade every 3 years instead, and that number drops to around $3,300. That is a difference of $6,700 over 1 decade on one device. Take that $670 a year and put it into an index fund at a 7% return. After 10 years, you are looking at roughly $9,000 from one category, one device. Now, multiply that logic across your laptop, your car, your TV, your appliances, every category where you are quietly replacing things that still work, and the number stops feeling abstract very quickly. The sharper standard here is simple. The question is not whether something newer exists. Something newer will always exist. That is the whole design. The question is whether what you have has meaningfully stopped serving you, or whether it has simply stopped feeling new. Those are two completely different problems, and only one of them actually requires you to spend money. Category 2. Occasion spending. The wedding industry in the United States is worth over $70 billion a year, and a significant portion of that is not the couple standing at the altar. It is everyone in the room watching them. The average American spends over $1,000 simply attending a wedding, not hosting one, attending one. When you add up the outfit, the shoes, the hair, the gift, the hotel, the flight, the bachelorette weekend that somehow became a 4-day trip, a single invitation can quietly cost you a month's savings. And most people absorb that without ever naming it as a financial event, because it does not feel like spending. It feels like showing up for someone you love. But if you think the guests have it hard, turn the camera to the couple for a moment. The average American wedding now costs between $30,000 and $35,000. Nearly 40% of couples go into debt to fund it, an average of over $10,000 of debt, to pay for one day. One day that is supposed to be the beginning of a shared financial life together. Many couples are starting that life already behind, already stressed, already making minimum payments on a celebration that ended months ago. And the cruelest part of that loop is this. The guests are spending money they do not have to attend. The couple is spending money they do not have to host. And everybody is performing for everybody else in a room full of people doing the exact same thing. Consumer culture has turned one of the most meaningful days of a person's life into one of the most financially destructive, and made it feel like love requires it. The big occasions are just the most visible version. The quieter one runs through your ordinary life. Think about the last time you opened your closet the week before a big event and decided you had nothing to wear. You had a closet full of clothes, but nothing that felt right for this specific occasion, this specific dress code, this specific version of yourself you wanted to show up as. So you bought something new. You wore it once, and now it just hangs in your closet. The hosting platter you bought for one dinner party. The theme decorations for the birthday that came and went. The specific shoes for the graduation. Each one feels like a completely reasonable one-time response to a specific moment. Together they are a pattern, and one of the quietest drains in everyday spending. So next time you get an invitation or feel the urge to buy something for an event you are hosting, stop before you open the app or walk into the store. Separate the emotion from the pressure for just one moment and ask yourself, can I show up to and for this moment and for the people in it as my authentic self without any financial cost or minimal financial cost? Most of the time, if you are honest, the answer is yes. The relationship does not need the outfit. The dinner does not need the platter. The moment does not need the spending. Consumer culture just got very good at making you feel like it does before you ever stop to question it. Category 3. False economy. You know that specific feeling the morning after a flash sale. You beat the countdown timer, you got the deal, and for about 20 minutes you felt genuinely smart. Then you woke up the next day and looked at the confirmation email and felt something you did not quite want to name. Not regret exactly, just a quiet. Why did I buy 3 of those? That feeling is your actual financial instincts trying to get your attention. False economy is what happens when you ignore it at checkout. It is the sneakiest category on this list, because it is the only one that comes disguised as good financial behavior. The mechanism is simple. Something looks cheap up front, so the real cost never gets calculated. The cheap blender that stops working in 8 months, the budget mattress that destroys your sleep and your back for 2 years before you finally replace it with the one you should have bought the first time. The economy flight with so many add-on fees that by the time you add luggage and seat selection, it costs more than the direct flight you talked yourself out of. The purchase that looks responsible on the surface is quietly the most expensive one in your cart. And then there is the bulk buying trap, which deserves its own moment because it feels so financially virtuous. You drove to the warehouse store, you bought the enormous pack of everything, you felt genuinely organized and ahead. And then 3 weeks later, you are throwing away half a bag of salad, a pack of yogurt that expired, and approximately 14 bread rolls that never stood a chance. The USDA estimates that the average American household throws away between 30 and 40% of the food it purchases. That translates to roughly $1,500 of food per year going directly into the bin. Not because people are careless, because bulk buying works on the logic of unit price without ever accounting for the unit waste. And what ties all of it together, the cheap product, the bulk shop, the flash sale, is the same trick running underneath each one. The price becomes the decision. Not the use, not the need, not the actual value of the thing in your life. Just the number on the tag. The moment that number looks small or discounted, the real question disappears. And if you are being honest, if you did not want it before the sale, the discount did not make it useful. It just made it feel irresponsible to leave behind. The math that actually protects you here is not the price tag. It is the cost per use. A $20 coffee maker that breaks in 6 months costs you more than the $80 one that runs quietly on your counter for 5 years. Before you buy anything on the basis of it being cheap or on sale, ask one thing. What is this actually going to cost me over time? The answer will tell you very quickly whether you are saving money or just performing the idea of it. Category 4. Convenience spending. The average American spent $1,850 on food delivery in 2025. Not dining out, not groceries. Delivery specifically. That is $1,850 to have food brought to the door. And 60% of Americans are doing it at least once a week. That is convenience spending. And what makes it sit differently from everything else on this list is that there is no trick here. You are not being manipulated by a countdown clock or swept up in a moment. You know you are paying more. You are just paying it so consistently and so automatically that somewhere along the way, it stopped feeling like a decision at all. And that is exactly the shift worth looking at. Because convenience was not always this. There was a version of it that made complete sense. The genuinely brutal week. The night everything went sideways. The moment where ordering was the only reasonable option. That version is still worth every penny. But that is not what 60% of Americans doing this every single week looks like. Somewhere between that and now, convenience stopped being the emergency exit and became the front door. You do not open the app because something got in the way anymore. And you open it because cooking feels like a decision you did not budget energy for. That shift from exception to default is quiet, it is gradual, and it is expensive. And it is not just food. Instacart processed $33 billion in grocery orders in 2024. Grocery orders, not restaurant food, actual groceries. Because walking the aisles on a Wednesday started to feel like too much. TaskRabbit will send someone to assemble your furniture, hang your curtains, wait in for a delivery, run your errands. Same-day shipping exists because 2 days started to feel long. There is now a premium sitting on almost every small friction in daily life. And the gig economy grew by 92% in a single year because enough people decided that paying to remove those frictions was simply what modern life costs. Here is what it actually costs, though. The average Instacart order runs 15 to 20% higher than the same shop done in store. Before the delivery fee, before the service charge, before the tip. Grocery delivery alone adds roughly $550 a year on top of what you actually spent on food. Add the food delivery habit, the occasional same-day shipping, the rideshare because parking felt like too much, and you are comfortably looking at $3,000 to $5,000 a year in premiums on frictions that, if you are honest, were never that painful to begin with. But here's the part that rarely gets named. When you outsource the small, ordinary tasks of your life, you do not just lose the money, you lose the moments those tasks were quietly giving you. The grocery run that got you outside and moving. The cooking that became an accidental hour of conversation. The errand that turned into an unexpected catch-up. Research consistently links these low-stakes shared activities, the undramatic, ordinary ones, to some of the strongest feelings of connection and daily well-being. Convenience does not just charge you for the delivery. It quietly sends an invoice for the moment it replaced. So this is not about never using these services. Sometimes they genuinely give you something back, and that is worth it. The question is just whether you are using convenience as a tool you pick up when you need it, or a setting you forgot you were living inside. Category 5. Subscription creep. Let us talk about Netflix for a second. Because Netflix was supposed to save us. You remember the pitch. No more waiting a whole week for the next episode. No more cable bills, no ads. Just you and every show ever made for less than $10 a month. Millions of us canceled cable for that. We felt genuinely smart doing it. And then Netflix started releasing episodes weekly. Then came the ad-supported tier. Then the password sharing crackdown. Then the price increases. Then the other price increases. Netflix Premium is now nearly $25 a month, and the average American household is simultaneously paying for Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, Max, Apple TV, and Peacock, which adds up to more than a standard cable package ever cost, to watch weekly episodes, with ads, across 6 different passwords. We left cable and ended up back at cable with a slightly better interface and significantly more confusion about where to find anything. That is the first irony. Here is the second one. Subscriptions have quietly colonized things that used to be a one-time purchase. Adobe Photoshop used to cost you once. Now it is $25 a month, every month. And if you stop paying, you lose access to everything you made with it. Microsoft Office was a single purchase for most of its existence. Now it is Microsoft 365, billed annually. Video games used to mean buy it and own it. Now there are monthly passes, season passes, battle passes, live service fees, and in-game currencies, specifically designed to make you forget you are spending real money. BMW ran a trial charging a monthly fee to activate heated seats, seats that were already physically installed in the car you had already bought and fully paid for. The hardware was yours, the warmth cost extra. And then there are the mystery boxes. Birchbox, FabFitFun, Ipsy, Loot Crate, subscription snack boxes, skincare boxes, book boxes, an entire industry built on paying monthly for things someone else chose for you, wrapped in tissue paper so the dopamine hit feels like a gift you gave yourself. Psychologists have a name for what keeps people subscribing even when half the box ends up in a drawer. Intermittent reinforcement. The same mechanism that keeps people at a slot machine. Sometimes you love what arrives. Sometimes you do not. And that unpredictability, that maybe this month is the one, is exactly what the model runs on. The mystery box market is now worth $42 billion globally. $42 billion for the feeling of a surprise. And here is what makes all of this genuinely stunning. Research tracking actual subscription spending found that the average American thinks they are paying around $86 a month across all their subscriptions. Their actual tracked spending is $219 a month. That is a gap of $133 every single month, nearly $1,600 a year, leaving accounts that people are not even aware of. Not because they are careless, because the whole model is engineered around one thing, making the yes effortless and the cancel inconvenient enough to keep getting pushed to next weekend. These platforms are not trying to keep you engaged. They are trying to keep you subscribed. Those are two completely different goals, and only one of them requires your account details. A subscription customer is worth dramatically more to a business than a one-time buyer. Not because they buy more, because they forget to stop. The entire financial model is built around that gap between what you signed up for and what you are actually using. And companies know that gap exists because they can see it in the data. They know exactly how many subscribers have not opened the app in 3 months. They just also know that as long as the charge is small enough not to hurt and the cancel button is buried deep enough in the settings, most of those subscribers will keep paying indefinitely. And the cancel button is always buried. Always. You signed up in 2 clicks. Canceling requires navigating to account settings, finding the subscription tab, clicking manage, being redirected to a page that reminds you of everything you will lose, being offered a discounted pause instead of a cancel, declining that, being asked if you are sure, and then, if you make it through all of that without giving up, receiving a confirmation email that still leaves you wondering whether it actually worked. That experience is not an accident. It is a design decision. Every extra step between you and cancellation is worth money to the platform, and they know exactly how much. The fix here is the simplest one on this list. Go through your statements, find every single recurring charge, and ask one question. Have I actually used this in the last 30 days? Not do I intend to. Not could I imagine needing it someday. Have I used it? Anything that cannot pass that test gets canceled today. Not this weekend. Today. Because this is the one category on this list that costs you money while you are asleep. Category 6. Status spending. You have probably heard the phrase keeping up with the Joneses. It is old enough to feel like a cliche, but the reason it has survived this long is that the thing it describes never actually went away. It just got more expensive, more visible, and significantly more creative about the ways it justifies itself. Status spending is not always about luxury. Sometimes it is about belonging. Sometimes it is about not being the one who visibly could not. And that version, the one driven not by desire but by social fear, is the one that does the most quiet damage. A close friend called me recently. She is going through a difficult period financially, currently out of work, watching every dollar. She was not calling to talk about her own situation. She was calling because she needed advice on how to recover $1,000 she had lent to a friend. The friend she lent it to is a practicing medical doctor, and the $1,000 went toward making her daughter a prom dress. Sit with that for a moment. A woman who is currently struggling financially lent $1,000 to a medical doctor. Not for an emergency, not for a bill, for a prom dress, for one night, for a 15 or 16-year-old who did not choose her mother's profession and did not ask to become the reason a friendship now has a financial debt sitting inside it. And the doctor is not a villain in this story. That is the part that matters. She is a person who has built an impressive life by every external measure. The degree, the career, the income. And still felt a pressure she could not absorb on her own. The pressure to show up to her daughter's prom in a way that looked the part. Whatever the part looked like in that community, in that school, among those other parents and those other dresses. She felt it so acutely that she borrowed money from a friend who had less of it than she did. That is what status spending does when it goes unexamined. It does not just affect the people who can obviously not afford it. It reaches into the lives of people who by every reasonable measure should be fine, and reminds them that fine is never quite the point. The point is what fine looks like from the outside. Consumer culture does not create this instinct. It just found a way to charge for it. The desire to belong, to signal success, and to not be the one who visibly fell short, these are human things. But there is a profound difference between spending that genuinely reflects your values and spending that is quietly funding other people's perception of you. One builds something. The other just keeps the performance running. Before the next status purchase, whatever it is, whatever it costs, ask yourself honestly who you are buying it for. If the answer is mostly other people, that is not a reason to feel ashamed. It is just a reason to pause. Because you can spend a lifetime funding an image that impresses people you may not even particularly like. And that is one of the most expensive things a person can quietly do with their money. Category 7. Trend spending. A lot of people hear about status spending and feel like that conversation is happening somewhere above them. Designer bags, luxury cars, high-end hotels. That is someone else's problem. And honestly, for a lot of people, that is true. But trend spending is status spending's more democratic cousin. Same instinct, more affordable entry point, much faster refresh cycle. And because it feels accessible, because it is accessible, it quietly becomes the version that costs more people more money without ever feeling like a serious financial decision. This is where the everyday version lives. The Stanley Cup that was suddenly everywhere. And not just the cup itself, but the boots that matched it. The charms people clipped onto it. The coordinated aesthetic that grew up around an insulated drink container until owning the right one felt like a personality statement. Then by late 2024, the Stanley was culturally over. Owala was in. The full cycle of obsolescence on a water bottle ran less than 2 years. The people who bought into the peak of the Stanley moment did not just buy a cup, they bought into a trend at its most expensive point right before it expired. And then came Labubu. It appeared in April 2024, and within weeks it was hanging off luxury handbags at red carpet events. Lines formed outside stores. A life-size version sold at auction for $150,000. Pop Mart's profits soared nearly 400% in the first half of 2025. Labubu generated over 1 billion TikTok views. And then, quietly, and the way all trends end, the resale values started dropping. The cycle was already turning before most people who bought one had finished deciding where to put it. Dubai chocolate. A pistachio and kataifi-filled chocolate bar that hit 1 billion views on TikTok and had people importing it, paying $15 to $25 per bar, hunting it in airport terminals across the country. The trend peaked and faded within months. Then Sunny Angels, then Smiskis, then whatever came next. Someone once documented the trends that had appeared on their phone in a single year. Labubu, Dubai chocolate, Sunny Angel, matcha latte, crumble cookie, moonbeam ice cream, and noted that even the people who were supposed to be in on them were confused about where each one had come from and why they suddenly cared. That confusion is not a bug in the system. It is the system working exactly as designed. Trends are trends because they end. That is not a cynical observation. It is the definition. A trend is a collective want with an expiration date. And the most expensive place to be when that expiration date arrives is holding something you paid peak price for because everyone around you had one. The Stanley at full price in January 2024, the Labubu at resale markup before the values dropped, the Dubai chocolate at the airport because you finally found it. By the time a trend is visible enough to feel unmissable, it is usually already past its peak. And the people who got there first are quietly selling to the people who just arrived. This video is not a coincidence. It sits squarely within a growing movement, the Buy Nothing Rebellion, where people looked at their homes, looked at their bank statements, looked at the drawer full of things their algorithm told them to want, and committed to buying nothing new for a year. Not because they are extreme, because they added it up. The corrective is simple and it costs nothing. When something appears on your feed and you feel that pull, that specific urgency of I need to understand why everyone has this, wait 30 days before you buy it. Most trends do not survive 30 days of deliberate indifference. If after 30 days you still want it, that is probably a genuine preference. If after 30 days you cannot remember why it felt urgent, the algorithm did its job and your money stayed in your account. You do not need to opt out of culture entirely, and you just need to be slightly slower than the cycle. And you will be surprised how quickly the urgency disappears. 7 categories. And at this point, you might be thinking, okay, I recognize some of these, but surely I am not doing all 7. And maybe you are right. But you do not need to be doing all 7 at full intensity for the number to matter. You just need to be doing most of them at average levels. And most people are. Conservatively, upgrading devices a little early costs you around $800 a year. A few occasion purchases you did not need, around $600. Bulk buying that expires and sale overspending, around $500. Delivery premiums 2 or 3 times a week, around $2,000. Subscriptions you forgot you had, around $1,600. The occasional status signal, around $700. Trend purchases that cycle in and out, around $500. Add it up and you are looking at approximately $6,700 a year. Not one dramatic mistake, just 7 ordinary categories running quietly in the background of your financial life. Put that into an index fund at a 7% average annual return, and after 10 years, you have approximately $92,000. After 20 years, around $275,000. After 30 years, over $600,000. Not from a raise, not from an inheritance. From the spending you stopped doing because you finally saw it clearly. The correction does not require a complete overhaul of your life. Audit your subscriptions today and cancel what you have not touched. Build a 30-day pause before anything trend or upgrade related. Ask yourself honestly before every non-essential purchase whether you are buying function or buying the feeling of it. And once a quarter, spend 10 minutes looking at where your money actually went. Not to feel bad, just to see it. Because you cannot make intentional decisions about money you are not watching. Here is the truth that sits underneath all 7 of these categories. Wealth is not only built by earning more, it is built by seeing clearly. Every category we covered today was designed to blur the line between what genuinely improves your life and what simply keeps you consuming. And for most people it works, not because they are careless, but because the system is very good at what it does. But awareness changes that. The Buy Nothing Rebellion is not about buying nothing. It is about deciding that you, not the algorithm, and not the culture, not the quiet pressure of what everyone around you seems to be doing, get to decide what is worth spending on. And when that decision is genuinely yours, you will be surprised how much less you need and how much further everything goes. If this is the kind of conversation that makes you think differently about your money, make sure you are subscribed because this is exactly what this channel is about. Real numbers, real patterns, and the conversations that actually move the needle. And always remember, luxury is easier when your money's organized. I will see you in the next one, and I love you.